The woman appeared in front of the glass in gorgeous attire. She was only there to clean the glass, with saliva flowing as she wiped. This scene left Jim feeling a little confused. He had never seen a woman drool over him like that before, despite having grown up so big. He asked Lisa next to him in confusion, "Is this female vampire a bit sick in the head?" Lisa also looked embarrassed. She hesitantly agreed with this view. The auctioneer on stage also realized it. The female vampire had made her decision. He immediately announced the result to the whole audience. The monster on the platform looked disdainful, as if he had already guessed that there was a black curtain behind the scenes. The precious vampire must have been arranged to be recruited by the noble long ago. The auction house unexpectedly put on a show and delayed them for a week. At this point, the auctioneer signaled for everyone to be quiet. It's now time for the buyers to evaluate and bid. As agreed beforehand, only the buyer chosen by female vampire. The transaction will be completed no matter how much the buyer offers. The female vampire also timely appears in front of the mirror, showing her charming figure, so that the noble behind the mirror can accurately offer a good price. Unexpectedly, a low-grade gem's price was quoted in the private room, causing the female vampire to petrify on the spot. The monsters on the stage were also in an uproar. The female vampire, hailed as a treasure of the underground labyrinth, is about to be sold for the price of a low-grade gem. The auctioneer also couldn't believe it would be such a bid. He immediately spoke up to stabilize the situation, asking the monsters not to jump to conclusions. Perhaps what Lord Noble said is about a top-quality velvet gem. As soon as the words fell, the female vampire immediately exposed it. It was confirmed to be a quote for a low-quality gem. At the same time, Lisa seemed to have predicted this embarrassing situation a long time ago. But she did not expect Jim to make such a low offer. Feeling the gaze of the whole audience, Jim remained indifferent. In his view, since the rule is to allow buyers to bid freely, only a fool would offer a high price. Besides, he has zero interest in this female vampire. There was no more movement coming from the VIP box. The auctioneer had no choice but to announce reluctantly that female vampire was sold for a low-grade gem. On the other hand, female vampire was somewhat annoyed at being sold at a low price. But she didn't mind. She kept urging the auctioneer to finish the auction. She couldn't wait to meet this new master. The auctioneer had to conclude the auction. He announced the successful completion of this auction. Before long, the 9th-floor black market merchant brought 2 items to find Jim. But as soon as they met, Jim went straight to the point and asked directly, "Who is the mastermind behind all this operation? And what is the purpose behind it?" Faced with questioning, the black market merchant couldn't help but feel stunned. However, quickly his expression returned to normal. He continued to play dumb as always. Jim also didn't hold back and immediately spoke frankly. He first beat up a neighbor who came to cause trouble. He was then ennobled as a baron and became a noble. After that, I received your invitation to attend the auction. Here, they forcefully thrust this precious female vampire upon me. I believe there is nothing more bizarre than this. The black market merchant's words made Jim relieved. Perhaps good luck is also a manifestation of one's strength. He advised Jim not to dwell on it. Just enjoy the rewards you have received. Jim may not believe his nonsense, but he also knows he won't get any answers. At this time, the black market merchant changed the subject, indicating that this female vampire indeed requires him to pay some price. Just because her original master was too fond of her. So if anything unexpected were to happen to the female vampire, the blame might fall on Jim. This remark suddenly startled Jim. He thought he had struck gold, but it turned out to be a hot potato. Since the original master likes her so much, it's a perfect opportunity to send her back. With that, he turned to leave. Now it's the turn for the black market merchant and the female vampire to be dumbfounded. The female vampire's face immediately turned purple with anger. She shouted to stop Jim and scolded him for not knowing good merchandise. It can be known that keeping her by their side is the dream of every noble in the underground world. Jim is showing no mercy at this moment. The human girl standing in the corner in his eyes is much more precious than female vampire. The female vampire saw the look of his determination and sighed helplessly. She also knew that her mysterious background made Jim wary. So she decided to tell him the truth, hoping that Jim would change his mind. Her name is Angela, and before Master, she was the Iron Giant Tory Count on the 11th floor of the underground labyrinth. The reason why she was betrayed is somewhat surprising. It is well known that vampires rely on blood and sign contracts with their masters. But Tory Count's blood is iron. So this is quite awkward, isn't it? So much so that female vampire has been starving for months. After speaking, she looked at Jim pitifully, saliva dripping from her mouth. I didn't expect that it would be such a funny and ridiculous reason. She also admitted that she had originally intended to pose as a vampire. She was looking for a new master at the auction, but those powerful noble entities turned out to be monsters themselves. The smell of blood is nowhere near as sweet as Jim's. She emphasized that she meant no harm. She was just too hungry. After saying that, she recklessly threw herself at Jim, as if ready to bite. The appearance of this seemingly gentle lady pouncing for food really scared Jim. The more Jim resisted, the more excited she seemed to get. Suddenly, the black market merchant emerged from behind, comforting Jim to just go along with her. It would definitely provoke Tori if she were to get angry. This statement instantly ignited Jim's anger, causing him to angrily hit her on the head. Only then did the resentment in his heart subside a little. But he also had to face reality. With his current strength, he couldn't compete with Count on the 11th floor. He had no choice but to agree to provide the blood he requested. Upon hearing this, female vampire Angela immediately ecstatically rushed over. Unexpectedly, an abnormal change occurred and Jim instantly activated his parasitic form. Several tentacles shot out from behind him, seemingly attempting to bind and devour Angela. Did Jim change his mind at the last minute? A man bought a female vampire at the auction of Monster, and a girl who cannot speak. When Jim led a large group of people back to Garo Labyrinth. This made Domi, who was there to greet them, slightly surprised. She instantly noticed the two women in the crowd. She shifted her gaze to Angela, who posed the greatest threat to her, and inquired about her background. Following that, Jim was introduced. Both of them were purchased at the auction. The little girl is named Labyrinth, and the baby is named Mila. This name was given to her just now. The blonde woman is named Angela, and she is apparently quite powerful as a vampire. Because Jim found out from the control system. She is a legendary savior. At these words, Domi cried bitterly with a troubled expression. Labyrinth is now both penniless and without provisions. Jim can't help but understand her little scheming. He said straightforwardly that Angela's eating habits don't consume food. She drinks blood. And the items she buys at auction are just bonuses given to her. She doesn't spend money. As soon as this statement came out, Angela immediately became displeased. She rushed forward to prove that she was purchased by Jim with a low-grade gem. Unexpectedly, no one responded. Only she was left standing there feeling sad and disappointed. Later, Jim asked Domi to arrange accommodation for Angela. However, Mila, feeling unwell, he decided to stay by her side to take care of her. Surprisingly, Domi was shocked by this decision. It seems there has been a misunderstanding. If he knew what Domi was thinking at the moment, he would probably want to give him a piece of his mind. In order to help Mila adapt to the new environment, Jim squatted down, his expression calm. However, he still used a commanding tone to talk to her. If there is anything going on in the labyrinth, besides looking for him, you could also find Domi, the manager. She is the second in command at Garo Labyrinth. Domi on the side naturally overheard their conversation. She immediately took on the role of the second in command and warmly picked up Mila, calling her a good daughter. Angela on the side had long seen Domi's extraordinary abilities. She was surprised to find out that Jim had a servant with a savior-level capability. To know that a servant with savior-level abilities is quite precious in the underworld. The difference between them and ordinary servants is that they can level up along with the strength of the labyrinth. Jim naturally understands the situation with Domi. Without Domi's management, Labyrinth would definitely be in chaos. He also can't be a laid-back absentee boss. Everyone is tired from the rush in these days. He instructed Joseph and Lisa to go downstairs and rest first. Suddenly, the black market merchant called out to him from behind. Jim simply told him to go find Domi for the money and then leave, not to think about anything else. In fact, Jim was deliberately leaving him aside. It's just that this black market merchant is too ambitious, even wanting him to expand the business into the human world. He naturally understands the benefits and risks involved. If this really happens, if the black market merchant organization sells the bizarre items from the underworld to the human world, it will inevitably cause a disaster at that time. So when the black market merchant proposed this idea, he was firmly rejected by Jim. However, after being rebuffed by Jim, the black market merchant turned to Angela instead. He asked Angela to take the opportunity to accompany Jim into the human world, and then gather information about the human world to report back to him. Just as they were secretly planning, Jim approached to send off the black market merchant to leave quickly. Then he planned to take Angela along to get familiar with Garo Labyrinth on the way. After a tour, Angela was secretly surprised. The labyrinth was clean and tidy, with everything in good order. And there were heartwarming scenes of orcs and dragonkin frolicking and playing. It was unlike any labyrinth she had seen before. She couldn't help but open up and say, "Although your labyrinth is small, it is managed very well, and it has everything that a noble should have. It's not like what is rumored in the noble circle." Upon hearing this, Jim also became interested and gestured for her to continue. "You became a noble in less than a year, so many traditional nobles instinctively reject you. They all say that you have disrupted the peace of the 9th floor. Of course, some nobles are very interested in you. This includes my former master Tori Count, because the situation on the 11th floor, where Tori Count is located, is now at a standstill. He hopes that someone like Jim will come forward to break the peace on the 11th floor." Here Angela is also candid. She talked about her secret agreement with Tori Count, in order to be able to leave Tori Count and achieve vampire freedom. Angela promised Tori Count that she would lure her new master to defeat Tori Count's enemy on the 11th floor. Jim, who knows the truth, doesn't seem surprised at all. Perhaps he had already guessed that there's no free lunch. He is still pondering Angela's words in his mind. If Garo Labyrinth develops too quickly, the surrounding labyrinths will definitely feel threatened. It is very likely that they will form an alliance to counterbalance it. It must be quite difficult to dominate a floor with just one labyrinth. Seeing him staring blankly, Angela thought he was unwilling to participate in the conflicts of the 11th floor. She slowly approached, planning to lean against Jim. Jim immediately came to his senses and pushed her away. He admitted that he was still busy dealing with the master of the undead on the 9th floor. It is estimated that it will take a long time before he can reach the 11th floor. Angela was not in a hurry either, actually. Anyway, there was no deadline specified in her agreement with Tori Count. The two of them made their way to the door of the room while chatting. Unexpectedly, as soon as Angela entered the room, she started to act up. She complained that the room was small and dirty, saying it was just like a prison cell. But there's nothing a cup of master's blood can't solve. At this, Jim simply didn't want to deal with her anymore. He didn't care about Angela Vampire's identity in the first place. But Garo Labyrinth doesn't keep idle people. He warned Angela to prove her worth quickly. Then he left without looking back. The next day, Jim returned to the surface. He asked Swindler about some recent news. Unexpectedly, Swindler dropped a big piece of news on him as soon as they met. A month ago, a famous explorer inherited a labyrinth on the 4th underground level unexpectedly. This immediately startled Jim. At the same time, he wondered about the reliability of this news. Because only a fool would boast about inheriting a labyrinth everywhere. Swindler gave Jim a disdainful look in response to his confusion, and explained impatiently that not everyone has the ability to explore the labyrinth alone with a 12-level strength like him. The explorer was with a team, so his inheritance was witnessed by his teammates throughout the whole process. And that explorer, he also does not have the ability to kill the entire exploration team. So when the team came back, the news quickly spread. Then Swindler revealed another piece of news to him, that is, the monsters in the underground labyrinth have formed a community. And they also held an auction recently. A captive underground baby and ordinary firearms. They can both be sold for thousands of velvet gems. This news greatly shocked Jim. Recalling the time at the auction, he didn't see any other humans. It seems that someone has already made contact with the black market merchant organization like him. But what he is more concerned about now is the movements of the adventurers inheriting the labyrinth on the 4th floor. Jim, however, was informed by the swindler that the guy had been killed yesterday. It is said that the labyrinth can earn a lot of money. He was killed by his jealous teammate in an attempt to seize that labyrinth. To their surprise, the murderer did not gain ownership of the labyrinth. As a result, the labyrinth reverted back to being ownerless. Speaking of this, Swindler suggested that Jim should also give it a try. He can provide all the relevant information for free. Fantasizing about if Jim could become a labyrinth master, as Jim's assessor, Swindler could also benefit from it. To show sincerity, he immediately provided Jim with another important piece of news. But this news came from the Exploration Association, not from his personal connections. According to reports, they discovered a potentially huge labyrinth on the 7th floor. And they sent people to explore it 2 weeks ago. You also know the leader of the team. It's that red-haired Mateo. Then he continued to persuasively coax and influence Jim. Instead of aimlessly wandering in the underground labyrinth, it's better to go straight to the 7th floor and test your luck there. Actually, even if he doesn't say it, Jim has also decided to go and explore. But at this moment, Jim was actually planning to trick Swindler first. He immediately stated that he could set off now. But this time is expected to be a tough battle. Swindler is expected to provide the necessary weapons for free. The man is trying to inherit the labyrinth of the underworld. He decided to brave the dangers alone and go to the 7th underground floor to find the gateway. A spatial rift suddenly appeared beside Domi. When she saw Jim dressed in hunting gear coming out of it, she knew he had received another commission and was planning to go far away. As the right-hand woman of Labyrinth, she must stay informed in real time about Jim's movements, who is known for his casual manner. After inquiring, it was found out that Jim plans to explore an empty labyrinth on the 7th floor. And he may have conflicts with the people from the Exploration Association. Domi suggested that Jim bring along a few more people for mutual support. Domi's reminder made Jim recall that Mateo does indeed have several formidable experts under him. But Domi and Bo are staying behind to maintain the daily operations of the labyrinth. Yellow Dragon is unreliable and not very dependable. Tia is still young and has great malice towards humans. Jim pondered for a moment. I can only trouble his first night. Joseph accompanies him on the journey. At this time, Angela, who was eavesdropping on the side, stepped forward and volunteered herself. She shouted that she wanted to go together. Then she started talking to herself. I have the ability to detect living things in the surrounding area. This can help Jim avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble. And she also has the ability to sneak and disguise herself. She can conceal her own aura and traces, making it impossible for others to detect. Jim remained silent, full of doubt on his face. She immediately activated her skill. Her blood-red shawl instantly turned into a blood mist. In the blink of an eye, her figure disappeared into Jim's shadow. Seeing that she indeed had a way, Jim had to agree. But he still warned her not to take the opportunity to suck blood. He would sit her flat in the shadow with one, but at this time, Lisa called out to Jim from behind, thinking that she also wanted to go together. However, she actually suggested that Jim bring Mila along with him. Just because of these few days of getting along, she unexpectedly discovered that Mila has the ability to create maps. She can record everything she sees on the map. But this special ability seems trivial to Jim, who already has a systematic map. Suddenly, Mila seemed to understand the meaning of their conversation. She grabbed his cloak, and immediately Jim received a prompt from the control system. Mila is sharing her sight with you. Jim focused and discovered Mila's map. It can be permanently synchronized with the system map, and it can be used to pinpoint the location based on her. This is simply a high-precision human GPS. In that case, let's go together. With him taking care by her side, Mila will definitely not suffer any harm again. But Mila's outings make Domi, who has already entered the role of a mother, very uneasy. She is unwilling to go against Jim's decision. She could only worryingly step forward and advise Mila to be careful on the way with a motherly tone. Make sure to take good care of yourself. A group of 4 people set off from the Garo labyrinth like this. They headed towards the entrance to the 8th floor. They had been on the road for 2 days. They really haven't encountered a single monster. But it's not surprising, as their team consists of 2 major labyrinth lords and a high-level vampire. The aura they emit must have long since scared off any monsters from approaching. But Joseph Knight, who led the way with a heavy heart, was filled with great resentment along the way. Jim couldn't help but speak up to inquire about his grievances when he saw his frustrated appearance. Joseph seemed to have found an outlet and turned around to point fingers at Angela, accusing, "She's not a good person. She never knocks before entering his room." The situation is a bit awkward now. He doesn't know how to resolve it either. Immediately, Joseph turned around, feeling wronged and muttering. This is the 3rd time in a row he has been on an external mission. It's been a long time since he had a good rest. Jim was puzzled. Hasn't he rested for a day after the auction ended? But how would he know? Joseph, this otaku, used to rest for at least a year after each adventure. As a qualified boss, he immediately stated that after this adventure is over, he would approve a long vacation for him. Of course, the prerequisite is that the master of the undead can obediently stay at home and not cause any trouble. This is what calmed down the indignant Joseph. Before long, the group arrived at the entrance to the 8th level. In order to avoid being caught by the entrance guards, the few of them exerted all their strength and quickly climbed to the 8th level. Unexpectedly, as soon as they reached the 8th floor, Joseph's condition became downtrodden. Jim thought he was still in a bad mood, but it didn't seem like an act either. It wasn't until I asked that I found out Joseph had never been to different floors. But how does this look of exhaustion relate to different floors? Angela, on the other hand, took it in stride. She explained that some species become weaker the farther they are from their place of birth. So many lords of the labyrinth never leave the floor they were born on. Joseph is obviously one of them. It looks like his physical strength may be weakened by about 20% every other floor. It is precisely for this reason that humans eventually won the war. Upon hearing this, Jim also recalled what Angela had said, when the war between humans and the underground labyrinth broke out. The main force of the labyrinth is composed mainly of middle to high-level monsters. You basically won't see any intelligent monsters coming from the deep underground. Angela then didn't forget to taunt Joseph as well. The higher up, the more useless he became. This made Joseph angry but unable to retort. His face turned green with anger, gaining a few pounds. Seeing the 2 of them starting to fight again, Jim quickly spoke up to stop them, urging them to leave quickly and not attract the entrance guards. Unexpectedly, in the next second, Angela's words almost took Jim's breath away, as she had already noticed that about 50 monsters were surrounding them. Sure enough, Angela must have done it on purpose. She only mentioned the urgency of time when people were almost there. Jim immediately instructed Joseph to hide Mila. Joseph immediately turned into a pool of slime and enveloped Mila. However, The scene before Jim instantly drove him crazy. Mila, wrapped in slime, was almost suffocated inside. Jim quickly reminded Joseph to leave a breathing hole before Joseph reacted. But this guy disguised himself as a green stone. What does that mean? Is he afraid that he doesn't stand out enough? It's too late to beat him up now. He immediately had Angela sneak into his shadow, and instantly activated the disguise skill. In an instant, Jim's figure miraculously disappeared on the spot. It turned out that Angela shared her stealth skill with him, enhancing Jim's disguise skill to invisibility. The stack buff skills transformed to concealment aura, erasing all traces. A few seconds later, a large group of dim-witted monsters rushed over. The lead pig-headed monster extended its nose, sniffing around the area where Jim and others were standing. He then let out a deafening roar and gave orders to his subordinates to search the vicinity. He was very sure that someone had just been here. Now they must be hiding somewhere nearby. When Jim saw a group of intelligent pig monsters coming, he began to figure out how to make them lead the way obediently. Become a guide for the 8th level. To avoid the danger, the female vampire purified into a mist of blood, sinking into the man's shadow. The other companions revealed their true forms, transforming into a conspicuous green boulder. Jim then disappeared, hiding behind the boulder until he vanished. He silently observed the movements of this group of pig monsters. At this moment, Angela's voice echoed in his mind. It was strange that he had the same ability as Domi, being able to communicate with him telepathically. Only after one inquiry did he find out that Angela could only communicate with him telepathically when she was immersed in his shadow. At the same time, the dozens of pigs below were only busy sniffing the residual scents in the air with their noses. They still didn't notice the green rock that Joseph had transformed into. This group of pig monsters is indeed a bit foolish. But the two leaders have a wise look on their faces. Obviously, they belong to the category of monsters with a certain level of intelligence. Jim suspects that they belong to a certain labyrinth faction on the 8th floor. He then calculated how to subdue them. As a guide on the 8th floor. After all, it was their first time on the 8th floor. They had no idea how to get to the 7th floor. After he informed Angela of his thoughts, he was asked if he had the noble seal on him. Because the noble seal can release noble pressure. It has a strong deterrent effect on ordinary monsters, and can compel them to do things for you. Upon hearing this, Jim immediately had an idea. His figure then disappeared in an instant, and the next second he appeared behind the seemingly commanding pig like a ghost. His sudden appearance frightened the pig out of its wits. Seeing that the newcomer was just a weak human, he quickly regained his composure. He immediately made a move, and with a strong lift of his hands, 2 huge rocks rose from the ground. Immediately after, he executed a move with a turn of his hand. The stones crashed towards the spot where Jim was standing. The smooth and flowing movements earned cheers from his companions. However, Ben only saw the human figure in the smoke and dust still unmoved. Jim stomped his foot heavily, dispersing the smoke and dust around. He walked slowly toward Pig, who was already frightened and paralyzed on the ground. At the critical moment, Pig became even more fierce. He forcibly toughened up and planned to use the same old trick again. He unleashed his signature move, Earth-Shattering Split. However, this time Jim did not intend to give him another chance. He leaped up and delivered a Thai-style flying knee straight to his face. Pig, who fell to the ground, was then stepped on by Jim's foot. And Jim quietly activated the emblem on his hand, the barren ring representing the noble seal. As a dazzling starlight flashed across, a faint golden light radiated from the ring, symbolizing the terrifying pressure of the noble. This pressure quickly permeated the entire venue, causing the pig monsters to feel an irresistible sense of intimidation. In the end, they all knelt down, one by one. At this point, one cannot help but admire Jim's plan. Originally, he could have shown the ring first to reveal his identity. But in order to better control the herd of pigs and take the initiative. Just now, Jim deliberately revealed his unbeatable strength. The desired effect has now been achieved. He has finally shown his intention to need a guide. After understanding Noble's needs, 2 of the pigs immediately transformed into left and right guardians. They loudly cleared a path through the pig herd. Of course, it was also Joseph's most glorious moment as a knight, walking proudly at the forefront of the group. But as Angela walked on, she noticed something was wrong. The pigs were casting greasy glances at her, intentionally or unintentionally. This feeling made her extremely uncomfortable, and she couldn't help but speak out in annoyance. Who would have thought that things would not be as she had imagined? Faced with her angry reprimand, the pigs were all in a state of panic, begging not to have their blood sucked. This scene aroused Jim's suspicion. He looked at Angela with a meaningful and indescribable look in his eyes. Angela immediately disdainfully spat at Jim. It also reminded her of a few years ago. It was indeed heard that a group of vampires once came to the 8th floor and carried out a massacre of pigs. It is estimated that it's because pigs' blood tastes better compared to other monsters. She also suggested Jim to catch a few to bring back for domestication. Not to mention, her suggestion actually made Jim very excited. He started to seriously consider it. Their conversation was naturally overheard by the pigs around them. They were all suddenly scared out of their wits. Just then, there came an angry roar from up ahead. Looking up, they saw several pigs shooting out from the smoke and dust. Angela immediately spoke up to remind Jim to be on guard. It seems that something is happening up ahead. Just as she finished speaking, a massive and enraged pig monster charged towards them, leading a herd of pigs. In an instant, it reached them. 2 guide pigs immediately stepped forward. They explained anxiously about the identities and intentions of Jim and his companions. Jim also timely released a noble pressure. However, this powerful pig monster is the chief of the Fang wild boar tribe, possessing the strength to resist Noble Sealer. However, it was not able to completely resist the pressure released by the Noble Seal. At this moment, a sense of awe rose in his heart, because he also knew that possessing the noble power of a vampire was not to be underestimated. He then saw him respectfully inquiring about the intentions of Jim and his companions. After a conversation, he learned that Jim and several others wanted to borrow a way through his tribe to get to the entrance of the 7th floor. He immediately spoke out to stop them. As soon as he finished speaking, Jim immediately drew his sword and assumed a fighting posture. He was so frightened that he hurriedly spoke up to explain that it was because of the war. War. Upon seeing this, Jim also calmed down and signaled him to continue speaking. The original 8th floor is now in a state of chaotic war. If Jim and his group break through forcibly, they may get trapped between various factions. Even a powerful noble would have a hard time passing through. Can't believe things have gotten so complicated. This is giving Jim a headache. If he's late, the 7th floor of the labyrinth might fall into Mateo's hands. At this moment, the Boar King seems to sense Jim's distress. He then spoke up. He can send troops to divert the attention of the other 8 layers of the labyrinth and clear a path for Jim and his group. His words immediately caught Jim's interest. He raised his head slightly and looked at the Boar King with keen interest. He wouldn't believe that the Boar King would go to such great lengths just to please a noble he had never met before. Indeed, the next second, the Boar King stated his purpose. He needed Jim to finish up on the 7th floor and then come back to the 8th floor to help him with a small favor. Judging from his expression, this small favor is definitely not a small task. Can we really trust what this Boar King is saying? How should Jim make a decision about this? In order to avoid the attack of the monster, the man actually asked a pig for help. Their plan is for the Boar King to lead the monster away. And Jim promised to do a small favor for Boar King once the matter is settled. After reaching a consensus, Jim and a few others were left in the tribe to rest for a while. Boar King then took his subordinates to patrol the territory and make preparations for their journey. After all, he needs to attract the attention of various powers from the 8 layers on this trip. fight for at least 3 days of travel time for Jim. He instructed his subordinates to increase manpower to patrol the surroundings during his absence. In case of enemy attacks, just hold the defense and wait for his return. Because the 7th floor's Crimson Lion always comes down to the 8th floor from time to time. Wild Boar Tribe's Boar King, who arranged everything quietly, withdrew his subordinates when attacked. He then took a deep breath. Immediately after, his limbs pressed against the ground as he circulated the energy throughout his body. His subordinates, who hadn't walked far, suddenly felt a surging energy wave coming from behind. Before they could turn around, Boar King's figure had already pierced through the rock wall, disappearing without a trace. They turned around and only saw a deep, bottomless corridor. These 2 big tusks of the Boar King have surely grown for a reason. Cooperating with this terrifying energy, it definitely serves as a vanguard to punch holes through. Shortly after, Jim and his group arrived. Before them was the passage cleared by the Boar King. According to the plan, the Boar King will make a big commotion on the 8th level. He will attract monsters from a 3-day journey away, as well as nearby monsters. Ensure sufficient safety for Jim's group and arrive at the entrance to the 7th floor in time. After, Jim summons the map to confirm the direction and route. They then began to hurry along the road. 3 days later, they arrived at the entrance of the underground labyrinth's 7th floor. Although Jim and his group arrived smoothly at the 7th floor, once they entered, they were unfortunately caught in the midst of a battle between various factions on the 7th floor. The original 3-way battle suddenly turned into a situation where the 3 factions united to attack the 4 of them. The situation was extremely dangerous and full of risks. However, they were helpless because there were simply too many monsters. Even though Jim and Joseph tried their best to protect Mila with all their might, there were still inevitable oversights. Seeing monsters' claws reaching towards Mila. But Mila suddenly changed dramatically. She immediately lowered her head to dodge the swinging claws. Then, she punched through the monster's body in one swift motion. After doing all of this, unexpectedly, she quickly reverted back to her original silly appearance. The movement behind him naturally caught Jim's attention. He was shocked to the core. He never expected Mila to hide so much. He is also grateful that Mila is resourceful, but he still feels it is necessary to double-check. He immediately moved to Mila's side and asked if she possessed combat skills. Mila obediently nodded upon hearing this. So Jim then handed the big knife in his hand to her. Mila, who took the knife, suddenly changed her demeanor once again. In an instant, she easily took down an opponent with a backhand knife strike. Mila swiftly lunged towards other monsters with smooth and fluid movements. It seemed like killing was her inborn talent.